The biblical library is an architectural marvel of layered texts, written and rewritten across centuries. Understanding its construction requires rigorous historical hermeneutics. In the second chapter of Matthew, the author makes an explicit claim regarding this source material. Jesus' family fled to Egypt specifically to fulfill a prophecy spoken by the prophet Hosea. But look at this side-by-side text comparison. When read in its original context, Hosea 11 is a historical retrospective about the nation of Israel. It states, "When Israel was a child, I loved him, and out of Egypt I called my son." There is zero indication here of a future prediction regarding a Messiah. This presents an immediate methodological problem. Did the New Testament author intentionally ignore the original context to force a theological agenda? Or is there an entirely different hermeneutical rulebook at play? First-century Jewish writers did not read their scriptures as a simple index of predictions. They utilized sophisticated techniques like typology and intertextuality to place the Old and New Testaments into a continuous, active dialogue. To decode this dialogue accurately, an exegete must classify exactly how the New Testament authors utilized their source texts. We map these usages across a three-point spectrum. On one end is the direct quotation. This occurs when an author explicitly signals their source using an introductory formula, like just as it is written, and keeps the original text structurally intact. Moving down the scale, we find the allusion. Here, the author drops the explicit signal. Instead, they weave the precise syntax, vocabulary, and conceptual structure of the Old Testament directly into their own discourse. Finally, on the far end is the echo. This is a subtle, sometimes single-word thematic whisper. Conscious authorial intent is highly debated at this level, but the intertextual resonance remains. The deeper you move down this spectrum, the more your analytical skill set must shift. You transition from passively reading the surface text to actively listening for underlying architectural resonances. Returning to Matthew chapter 2, the author does not extract predictive data from Hosea. Instead, he builds a complex typological analog. Look at the historical geometry of these two accounts. On the left, the original Exodus. An evil pharaoh orders the death of male infants. Moses is preserved in Egypt and eventually leads his people back to the land. On the right, Matthew maps Jesus' early childhood with exact symmetry. Herod orders the execution of infants. Jesus is preserved in Egypt and later returns. The theological mechanism driving this is recapitulation. Israel was identified as God's son in the Old Testament, but the nation failed in its calling. Jesus is presented as God's greater son, stepping into the outline of Israel's history to fulfill its true destiny as a new Moses. By understanding this analogical framework, Matthew's appropriation of Hosea 11 ceases to be a contextual error. It operates as a valid, highly structured application of first-century rabbinic hermeneutics. This structural layering becomes even more apparent in unsignaled allusions. Take the arrival of the foreign magi, bringing gold and frankincense in Matthew 2. This text comparison cross-references the magi narrative with the prophecies of Isaiah 60. We find exact matches in wording, structure, and function. Isaiah states that nations will come to your light, mirroring the star. He details camels arriving with the wealth of the seas, paralleling the magi. Finally, Isaiah explicitly lists gold and frankincense as the precise gifts brought to the restored city. Without quoting a single verse, Matthew claims that the promised restoration of Israel and the new creation are actively being inaugurated in real time. This structural weaving extends deep into the epistles as well. In Ephesians chapter 2, the author drops distinct Old Testament conceptual markers into the text, referencing circumcision, the covenants, and the law. Notice the near-verbatim weave occurring in verse 17. Looking at the Greek New Testament alongside the Septuagint text of Isaiah 57, the correlation is exact. The author writes that Christ preached peace to those who are far away and peace to those who are near, utilizing the identical vocabulary for peace, far, and near. Through these hidden allusions, Paul takes Isaiah's grand program of our restored Jerusalem and maps it directly onto the formation of a unified church containing both Jew and Gentile. Identifying these allusions requires methodological rigor. Without strict validation criteria, An exegete risks subjective overreading, finding connections that do not exist. A proposed allusion must pass a series of stress tests. Is there syntactic similarity? Are there clear structural parallels? And does this specific interpretation align with how the text was used in early Jewish literature and rabbinic tradition, like the documents preserved in the Dead Sea Scrolls? When a connection is validated, the hermeneutical focus shifts. It becomes less about isolating strict authorial intent and more about exploring the resulting intertextual dialogue established between the two connected texts. The exegete is left to answer two ultimate questions. What specific meaning is missing if the New Testament is read without its Old Testament subtext? And how does the new text ultimately transform the Old? New Testament authors embedded the rich historical geometry of the Old Covenant into the foundations of their writing. Rigorous exegesis depends on an ear trained to hear the echo.